the seventh day, the Sabbath day, the coronation of November 2nd, 1930, the coronation of the King of Glory, Haile Selassie I, manifesting the eyes of all the nations to see. His name is written, his name is wild, the father of the conquering lion, blessed be Jah. Haile Selassie I, king over all the earth. 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 Turn to 1 Timothy chapter 3 verse 16 without controversy. Great is the mystery. God was manifesting the flesh with his word, sent his son unto us, the promised Messiah, Primus, the same Jesus.
Greetings in the name of His Imperial Majesty Emperor Haile Selassie I, through his Son and Savior, Jesus Christ, Primus St. Croix. Now when we say Jesus Christ, Primus St. Croix, what we mean by that, as far as Primus being the Savior and Primus being the Christ, is we're talking about his gospel. We're talking about his message. And the office of Christ has been prophesied as the source for the correct interpretation of the scriptures. And the Bible represents righteousness. Now the Bible has been used to corrupt and it has been used for evil, but its true purpose is for righteousness and for godliness and for holiness. And Christ is going to be that office, that person who is going to uphold that in the correct order. He's going to be the one who's going to establish true righteousness. You know, he's going to show us, you know, God in his full glory and give him the correct respect and honor that he deserves. So when we say Primus is the Christ, what we're saying is that he represents His Majesty correctly. You know, that he spoke the truth about His Majesty through the scriptures, and actually in all aspects, not just as far as religion is concerned, but also on the secular level as well. So what that means is that it's bigger than just you know, Christ, because Christ also had disciples and followers, and all of us have a part to play in this. All of us have a part and a gift and a talent that we must use, not to serve man, but to serve God. You know, and for us who takes that office seriously, we must guard that righteousness and guard that message from corruption, because there is going to be a fight from the devil, from wolves in sheep's clothes, from deceivers who's going to try to corrupt that office, who's going to speak lies and speak, you know, deception and misdirect people away from the truth. And when we say the truth, we mean righteousness. So whatever you may perceive to be godliness, you know, if your actions are not righteous, then you don't have the truth. So this is not so much about how well you can speak, and even so much about how much you know, but more so about your actions, because it's always going to come down to your actions. So if someone is teaching the wrong thing, no matter what they profess, or no matter what they think, or no matter what they feel their calling is, if you're teaching something that is harmful to the public, something that is, you know, detrimental to society, something that destroys lives, you know, then you don't represent Christ, you don't represent God, and it doesn't matter what the argument is. You know, so we're not gonna lose our common sense with listening to the secular world and secular knowledge and these college professors and these so-called academics with great research and their sources. And however, whatever the argument is that they present, at the end of the day, we're going to look at what effect they have. And if the effect is harmful, then it does not represent His Majesty, even if they try to use His Majesty as what they're saying they represent. So again, deception, okay, because the devil is an angel of light, right? So even the devil, you can read about it in Luke 4 about how he's using scriptures to try to present himself to be of God. So don't be surprised when people present themselves to represent His Majesty, but they're teaching you, but the effect of what they're teaching is harmful to society. And the reason why I'm mentioning that is in regards to the 1971 Psychotropic Conference that His Majesty did not sign. Now, some people take that to mean that, okay, His Majesty didn't sign the conference, so therefore he was against it. And that interpretation is false, because under international law, just because a country does not sign a conference doesn't mean that they object to that conference. And the UN publishes all the objections to the conferences, and you can look it up and see that His Majesty's government did not have any objections to the 1971 conference. So just because it wasn't signed does not necessarily mean that he was against it, because there's no evidence that he was against it. Many countries do not sign treaties on the spot because they need to consult with their capitals. There's an entire legal process involved when it comes to agreeing to these conferences, to these, it's just not as simple as people who do not have no experience and just sit back in their living room and try to say that and imagine how they believe policy works. It's just not as simple as presenting a conference a legal document to a diplomat and expecting them just to sign it on the spot. So again, there's no objections that His Majesty's government has presented in regards to the 1971 Psychotropic Conference. And we need people, if we're going to be of Christ, we need people who know how to interpret information in a positive and righteous manner that will protect the public from harm, because there's a lot of substances contained in this 1971 Psychotropic Conference that is detrimental to the public's health. I mean, crystal meth, fentanyl, these things kill you. These things destroy lives, and it's without a doubt their negative effects. So if anyone comes along and says that we need to legalize crystal meth or any of these or the argument that His Majesty is in favor of or His Majesty is against legalizing the Psychotropic Conference, as if he's in favor of these substances being issued out to the public, that interpretation does not represent the order of Primus and Croix. That interpretation does not represent Haile Selassie. That interpretation does not represent godliness, because again, these substances clearly will kill you. 2 grams of fentanyl will kill you. So let's look at what exactly a psychotropic substance is. And this is any substance where their main effects are on the central nervous system. Cannabis marijuana or hashish is one of the psychotropic drugs. It is more commonly known as hashish in Ethiopia, referring to marijuana. Cannabis use is forbidden by law, and this is according to His Majesty's law. If you are found in possession of it, you could be given a 6-month prison sentence and a fine. However, it's not widely used in the country. Only 2% of Ethiopians use cannabis. If you are arrested for cannabis possession in the country, you are meant to be brought to court within 48 hours. It is also illegal to sell cannabis in Ethiopia, and penalties are more severe for this type of offense. And there's a bunch of laws that are under His Majesty's regulations that he promulgated that will ban you from using cannabis, growing cannabis, selling cannabis, and any of the psychotropic substances. So we're not just talking about cannabis, and this video is not necessarily singling out cannabis. We're talking about all of the psychotropic substances, because there are also substances that are new substances that are not even included in the 1971 convention that are also harmful. So we are talking about the ability to protect the public from harm, the ability to know how to interpret information to build a healthy society. So we're not gonna speak about how we represent the kingdom of God and we turn our people into drug addicts and to drug dealers. So that's not the purpose of His Majesty's empire, and that was not what he wanted for people to do. So we're not going to advocate for our people to be drug dealers and drug addicts who are addicted to these substances. And therefore, what that means is that we need to present a positive interpretation of the law as is written in the Civil Code Article 1737. Acts should be interpreted in favor of effectiveness. An interpretation that gives a reasonable and effective meaning is preferred over one which does not. So we prefer a meaning of the law that protects the people from overdosing on drugs, dying on drugs, families getting torn apart because of these harmful substances. We prefer that over a law that calls for the legalization of crystal meth. And crystal meth obviously destroys people's lives. Now, the principal laws under which psychotropic and narcotic drugs are controlled in Ethiopia are the Pharmacy Regulation of 1964 and the Penal Code of 1957. Both of these regulations was issued by Haile Selassie. And again, these are the principal laws under which psychotropic and narcotic drugs are controlled and prohibited in Ethiopia. Again, this comes directly from Haile Selassie. The basis of drug control legislation is the Pharmacy Regulation of 1964, which controls the supply of pharmaceutical products at all stages, such as manufacture, registration, quality control, export, import, distribution, and store. So you cannot, according to His Majesty's law, you cannot have narcotics or drugs without the permit and license from the government. So you can't operate a pharmacy, which is any kind of business dealing with drugs, without a license from His Majesty's government. And so there also was no exceptions for religion. There wasn't no clauses for religious use as well. You needed a license from His Majesty's government in order to deal with drugs, in order to manufacture them, sell them, use them, issue them out. That had to be licensed, which means that medical use, which means medical uses for these drugs, the medical use for people who are sick, and for where it is medically valid for them to have it. That is what the pharmacy regulations is for. So medical usage is a valid reason, and when we read it, his pharmacy regulations, we can see how all of that is written into the law. So Article 3 of the Pharmacy Regulation of 1964 says narcotic shall mean any drug classified as a narcotic under such international narcotics conventions as are binding on Ethiopia and included in the current revised list of narcotic drugs under international control as issued by the Permanent Central Opium Board, sometimes referred to as the International Narcotics Control Board. Article 3, that was Article 3, 13. And this is Article 3, 4. It says, drug shall mean any substance including all narcotics, such as a medicine or in making medicines, and shall include without limitation all medicines and preparations recognized in the International Pharmacopoeia for international and external use, and all other medicines and preparations recognized by law as such within Ethiopia. Now, this definition of drugs and narcotics prohibits psychotropic substances, with or without the 1971 conference being ratified by His Majesty's government. His law of 1964 prohibits these psychotropic substances from being used. Whether those drugs are included under the 1971 convention or the new psychotropic substances that was manufactured after 1971, right? So there's drugs that are continually being made, and His Majesty did not create a written law to bring his people and his country out of antiquity and up to date for us to just stay within the 20th century. So we must know how to interpret the law broadly for the new drugs of the 21st century, for the new drugs of the future, for problems of the future that was not present in the 20th century. So the problem of drugs, just to be clear, the advent of the drug problem only became a worldwide phenomenon once travel and industry developed in the 20th century, and we're talking about primarily airplanes. Now, airplanes and ships that started mass production in the 20th century, this now made the grounds for drugs that are manufactured in South America to reach, Asia, to reach Africa, to reach Europe. That movement was not happening on a mass scale before the 20th century. So this is a problem, a new problem. This is a new global industry and a new global problem. This is, again, something that really started taking place in the 50s and 60s, 70s, 80s. That's when it really started picking up, and right now, in the 21st century, we can see how it's everywhere. But that is a new phenomenon. So when His Majesty came into power in 1930, the drug epidemic wasn't a priority. It wasn't a precedent, right? And a professor at Addis Ababa University named Tilahun Teshum. He spoke about this. He said in Ethiopia, even though there were laws and regulations during the imperial era for the control of narcotics, the institutional capacity of the government was not adequate enough to effectively address the issue, because that wasn't a priority at that point. So when His Majesty was issuing these laws in 1964 and in 1957, what he was doing was laying the groundwork. But this was the beginning of the fight. This was at the very beginning of when drugs was becoming a issue, a epidemic, a huge problem, which it is right now. And because of the seriousness of this issue, we have to be clear on the fact that we cannot allow anyone to deviate and to deviate from protecting the public and to give out false interpretations of the law that will lead the society down, downward, in a downward spiral on these harmful drugs such as crystal meth and fentanyl and even cannabis. So marijuana once again, God did not call us to be on these drugs. That wasn't the calling from His Majesty. And if it wasn't clear from the pharmacy regulations, then we can also look at the penal code in article 5.10. It says, whosoever without lawful authority produces or makes, transforms, imports, exports, or transports, acquires or receives, stores, offers for sale, or distributes, or procures for another poisonous drugs or narcotic substances is punishable with simple imprisonment for not less than 3 months and fine without exceeding $20,000. So now we have read in the pharmacy regulations how narcotics and drugs is defined, but there's another term that is introduced for those who need these definitions and who are not clear about what it means to protect people from harmful substances. It mentions poisons, which is substances that will cause harm to a human. Poisons, right? All of this is regulated, not just drugs or narcotics, but also now poisons. And we can continue in the penal code. It says in Article 786, whosoever apart from the case is punishable under the penal code, Article 510, manufactures or prepares, sells, offers for sale, delivers, or gives without lawful permission or an express medical prescriptions with such a required substances or products which are narcotic, toxic, poisonous, noxious, or dangerous for the health. Right? So again, any substance, whether this substance is included under the 1971 Psychotropic Convention or not, any substance that is toxic, poisonous, noxious, dangerous, or narcotic is prohibited under Haile Selassie's law. And we will not accept any definition from anyone who tries to mislead the public into believing that it is okay to legalize these harmful substances such as crystal meth, fentanyl, and even marijuana. That was not what Haile Selassie stood for. And we must accept the fact that His Majesty is calling us to become greater. He is calling us to do better. He is calling us to use our natural talents and use our natural ability to overcome temptation. So you must find the strength within your spirit to cope with your problems, to cope with the challenges of life, and again, His Majesty pointed the way towards doing that, and that was through religion and through education. If you develop your spirit in righteousness, to develop a strong spirit, to feed positive messages into your soul, to read books that will uplift you, to educate yourself, to stay within the scriptures, stay within prayer, and stay within righteousness, then you will find everything that you need in order to cope with all of the problems that we all, everyone has problems. To cope with your problems, you'll find everything that you need within religion and within education. You just have to use your religion correctly and use your education correctly, and that would mean for a positive, for something positive, and not accept negative interpretations that mislead us and lead us in the wrong direction. May His Majesty have mercy. May His Majesty protect us from evil, and may we have the courage to fight against the evil wherever that may be, however it presents itself, and from whoever it may be. Blessed be Jah Rastafari.